Part 50. The Liu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 491. Chapter 491 I have never had friends. Gu Jinchu suddenly felt vaguely that she was a person with a story. He was curious but didn't know how to ask. He wanted to comfort but didn't know how to comfort him. Just when he felt conflicted and uncomfortable, Xiaoran spoke. I have never had any friends in school, although I don't know if you think of me as a friend. I think of you as a friend, and I never knew what friends were like before I met you. Xiaoran didn't have any emotional fluctuations when she said this, but her eyes never left the other side of the lake. She spoke as if she was not talking about herself. She is probably used to being alone and having no friends, so she talks as if she is talking about other people's things. Gu Jinchu obviously didn't think that way. He thought that a girl like Xiaoran would have many friends. It seemed that he was overthinking it. She doesn't like to talk much, and she blushes easily when facing someone, which may be the reason why she doesn't communicate much with others. However, a girl like her shouldn't have no friends. Such a good girl. Why don't you make friends? Gu Jinchu couldn't help but blurt out. Xiaoran was finally willing to take her eyes away from the other side of the lake, but she only glanced at Gu Jinchu and then looked away. After a long sigh, she spoke again. I used to have a lot of friends that I consider to be friends. Xiaoran was a little proud when she said this. If she hadn't mentioned it, she would have almost forgotten it. It turns out that she also had a lot of friends, but that kind of it felt like she had forgotten about it a long time ago. What happened next? Where are so many friends? Gu Jinchu asked anxiously. Xiaoran smiled. Her smile seemed to be self-deprecating, and she said, I betrayed you all. All of my friends suddenly left me. There was no reason. It was even shameful. I didn't know how to convince all the girls in the class. From then on, I no longer have any friends, and I feel disheartened by this kind of thing. I think it's good to be alone. Gu Jinchu listened to her as if she had experienced it himself. He gritted his teeth and said, why are they like this? If I don't play with you, I will be blind. What a good girl you are. Xiaoran was shocked for a moment. This was the first time someone praised her as a very good girl. Yes, I'm blind. I deserve better friends, like you. Xiaoran looked at Gu Jinchu, who was even angrier than himself, and wanted to laugh and cry. He was the first person to listen to her story, the first person to defend her, and the first person to praise her. What a wonderful boy. Yes, we are all your friends, good friends for life. We will never abandon you. We will never betray you, Gu Jinchu comforted her. Xiaoran thought about what he said for a while and thought, are we just going to be good friends for life? To be honest, she wouldn't be willing to just be good friends with him for the rest of her life. But she nodded, and let's talk about some things later. If you come to school here, I will definitely protect you and make everyone in the class be friends with you, Gu Jinchu said boldly, just like an ancient emperor said, look, this is the country I have built for you. Same. Xiaoran nodded and suddenly felt that her vision was a little blurry. She held her breath and sniffed and said, I will finish high school well. When I go to college, I will go to the same college as you. Until then, you will protect me. Okay, it's settled, Gu Jinchu said and opened his arms. Xiaoran looked at his open arms and was at a loss for a moment, but after remembering what she had missed on the bicycle, she gritted her teeth and reached out, took 2 steps forward and entered Gu Jinchu's arms. He is very warm. Gu Jinchu patted her on the back and said, good girl, be strong. So Xiaoran nodded vigorously. End of this chapter. The Liu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 492. Chapter 492 Seeking Abuse. The two stood by the lake for a while. After a while, Gu Jinchu suddenly asked, you actually want to go to the other side of the lake, right? Sioran was a little surprised. How do you know? You just kept looking at the opposite side, and I have already seen everything, Gu Jinchu said proudly, as if I have seen through everything. Sioran smiled and said, yes, but the snow is very slippery. Next time, when it gets warmer and the ice melts, we can go fishing together. Gu Jinchu smiled, thinking that this silly girl had a lot to think about, so he nodded. I owe her once to take her fishing across the lake. Then let's go back after a while, Gu Jinchu asks Sioran's opinion. They have been out for a long time, they should be tired of it. Okay, let's just go back the way we came and go back, Sioran said. Good. The two of them agreed, so they walked back while chatting. Maybe it was because Sioran trusted Gu Jinchu and told Gu Jinchu everything about her, or maybe it was because they had a pleasant time getting along with each other. In addition to Sioran enjoying chatting with Zhang Wanan, now there is another person added to her, so it's Gu Jinchu. She started to dare to make trouble with Gu Jinchu and was no longer very restrained, but the only thing that didn't change was that she still blushed easily. When the two of them were joking all the way back, they found that the two people were sitting on the chairs and had not moved at all. I don't know if they had not changed their positions or if they had returned to their original positions. But those who didn't know this would probably think that the two of them were frozen. Hey, you're stuck to the chair, Gu Jinchu walked up to the two of them and snapped his fingers. Loses who clicked his tongue in displeasure, thinking how could he come back so quickly? Their world is over before it even begins. Although Loses who was unhappy, the expression on Zhang Wanan's side was in sharp contrast to his. At this moment, she was looking at the two people who had just returned opposite with a smile. Although the smile was pretty, Gu Jinchu felt inexplicably scary. He waved his hand in front of Zhang Wanan and asked, why are you laughing? It's so weird, he rubbed his arms exaggeratedly. Zhang Wanan. You have a charming smile, but you look ugly, Loses who was so angry that he defended Zhang Wanan. Gu Jinchu felt like he had been stabbed. He covered his chest and accused him as if he was hurt. Lao Lu, please speak with your conscience. I am very handsome. I am your male idol. Loses who looked at the idiot-like person opposite him expressionlessly. Zhang Wanan was amused by him, pointed at him and said to Sioran, Sister Sioran, look at this idiot. Sioran smiled helplessly. Why did she feel that Gu Jinchu always liked to find trouble in front of these two people? Sioran, you see they are all bullying me. We are good friends. You have to help me. Gu Jinchu couldn't bully two people by himself, so he started to win over Sioran. Sioran was stunned for a moment and then complained, who told you to be stupid? Even you are talking about me, we are no longer good friends. Gu Jinchu was a little crazy. Where is the good girl in his heart just now? Where did it go? Where did it go? They all bullied him, how could he, Gu Jinchu, survive? He wanted to scream a few more times, but Loses who saw his intention and interrupted him in time, saying, stop shouting, sit down and play the game. Gu Jinchu immediately held back and sat down between Loses who and Zhang Wanan. He pushed Zhang Wanan away and stood on Loses who's shoulder. He asked excitedly, really? He has been waiting all morning, and it is almost noon. Loses whose face darkened. He glanced at the hand on his shoulder and said coldly, you squeezed in and away from me. End of this chapter. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 493. Chapter 493 I suddenly like children very much. Loses whose face darkened, he glanced at the hand on his shoulder and said coldly, you squeezed in and away from me. Gu Jinchu smiled awkwardly and stood up immediately, then pulled Zhang Wanan, who was pushed to the outside and looked confused, back and said, little ancestor, Please sit down. Zhang Wanan snorted coldly, thinking that his attitude was quite sincere, so he forgave him. Then let's go sit over there. Gu Jinchu smiled and sat back on the bench with Xiaoran. The two of them started playing games. The two girls were not good at these games and did not like them either, so they had no interest in watching them. Instead, they felt bored and a little drowsy while sitting aside. Sister Ran, let's go and play. Zhang Wanan stretched out her head to look at Xiaoran, who was blocked by Gu Jinchu. Xiaoran also stretched out his head to look at Zhang Wanan, and then the two of them stood up. Be safe, be careful. Be safe, be careful. Gu Jinchu and Luzes, who had a tacit understanding and gave instructions at the same time. The two were stunned for a moment, covered their mouths and snickered, then held hands and ran away. Sister Ran, where did you go to play? Zhang Wanan asked when they were farther away. I just went to the lake for a walk. I didn't go anywhere, Xiaoran said. Zhang Wanan nodded, thought for a while and asked, will you come back to play with us after you leave for the weekend? Xiaoran did not answer, but asked, do you consider me a friend? Zhang Wanan heard her question and immediately nodded without hesitation and said sincerely, yes. Then come back and come after the winter vacation, Xiaoran said with a smile, in a good mood. She felt like her mood was like sunshine today, and her heart was warm. She hadn't felt this way for a long time. Maybe they were too cute. Then you stay at my house during the winter vacation, and then we play together every day, and you can even have an appointment with Gu Jinchu. Zhang Wanan raised an eyebrow at Xiaoran when she mentioned Gu Jinchu. Xiaoran couldn't help but smile looking at her little appearance. The two of them walked over there. There were many people there, including many children. On a whim, the two of them ran to entertain the children. The child's skin was tender, and his smile was like a silver bell. The two of them were surrounded by children and played happily. Zhang Wanan looked at the children and thought that this was probably how Luzes who teased her when she was a child. Yes. Suddenly I like children very much. The two people played with the children for a long time and forgot to go back. The two people over there who had finished playing one game after another raised their heads and looked at the distance for a while, and then got ready to get up and look for the two people. When they looked for it, they found that the two people were having a great time playing among a group of children, and their laughter spread far and wide. It looked like they were playing an eagle catching a chicken. Zhang Wanan was followed by a long line of children, while Xiaoran opened her arms in the role of an eagle. Zhang Wanan, who was a child herself, looked very clumsy because of the line of children behind him. Luzes who couldn't help laughing as he looked over there. Gu Jinchu became interested when he looked over there. He shouted and ran over to join the game. At this moment, there were 3 child kings over there. Luzes who couldn't just stand there and watch, but he didn't want to join the game, so he had to walk slowly over and sit on the edge of the flower bed and look over there. However, as soon as he sat down, the parents of the children were attracted by his appearance. When Luzes who saw that the situation was not good, he wanted to stand up and avoid it, but it was too late. The parents had already gathered around him with smiling faces. The young man is very good looking, and Aunt stood in front of him with a kind smile. Luzes who politely said thank you and wanted to find a gap to walk out but didn't know where to go. Asking for votes and positive comments. End of this chapter. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 494. Chapter 494. I have a daughter to marry you. Luzes who politely said thank you and wanted to find a gap to walk out but didn't know where to go. How old is the young man? Do you live around here? 17 years old, and, can you give me a place? I want to go out. Luzes who finally couldn't help but said humbly. He was afraid that he would not be able to get out if he stayed any longer. These aunties were surrounding him and he couldn't help it. A little flustered. He has never begged someone so humbly to make way for him. Normally, he would automatically make way for someone who saw him at school. Society is so cruel. But who knew that his words didn't work? The ant walked forward again and said, "The weather is so nice, sit down and bask in the sun and chat with the ants. It is really rare to see such a handsome young man, an ant like you are." Loses who? So is this a nymphomaniac? He is still young, only a 17-year-old child. That's right, sit down, kid, and get some sunshine, an ant agreed. One ant agreed, and then more ants joined in. Loses whose mind was agitated by the noisy chatter. Loses who knew as soon as he saw the formation that he couldn't leave. This ant must have been the leader of the square dance at night. Otherwise, why would there be so many people speaking for her? He also has friends, but his friends are having a great time playing games, as if they have not seen the group fight here at all. Loses whose face was almost gloomy. He was very unhappy now, but there were so many children here, and it was hard for him to lose his temper. "Son, do you have a girlfriend?" the ant suddenly asked. When Loses who talked about this question, the corner of his mouth raised. He was happy to answer, but before he could speak, the ant smiled and said in a flattering way, "I have a daughter at home, hey, she is 25 years old this year, look at." "What? Daughter? Are you here to recruit a son-in-law?" He thought it was because he was so charming that the ants couldn't take their eyes away. "I'm sorry," Auntie Loses who couldn't help but twitching the corners of his mouth, "I am 17 years old this year, and I am still underage." "It's okay, my daughter can wait for a young man like you," the ant said excitedly, and then began to rummage through her bag again. "This is a photo of my daughter," she said, holding her mobile phone. Her daughter can wait, but can he say that he doesn't deserve to wait? Loses who was not interested in watching it at first, but his aunt held up her cell phone and pointed it at him, so now he had to watch it even if he didn't. "I saw the girl in the photo wearing a pair of rectangular glasses, wearing black clothes, standing under the peach blossom tree, smiling brightly with big white teeth exposed." Loses who squinted and took a closer look. "These buck teeth." "I'm sorry, Auntie, I have a girlfriend." Loses who used some strength to push the mobile phone away from him. "Oh, it shouldn't be, how could it be?" The ant's face was full of disbelief. Having finally found a handsome guy, why would he run away so easily? Loses who pointed at Jongwanan, who was playing games with the children over there, and raised the corners of his mouth as he said, "Over there, my future wife, or fiancée for short." The ant looked in the direction he pointed and said "ah" in disbelief, and then the aunties around her started whispering. "There is no doubt that we are childhood sweethearts and have lived together since childhood," Loses who said with a smile. His eyes were very soft when he looked at Jongwanan. Auntie still didn't quite believe it, but she seemed to have to believe it. The sisters around her began to tease her. She was a little angry. She stood up with a cold snort and called her child, asking for votes, activity, and praise. End of this chapter. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 495. Chapter 495. After you leave, I will take care of an inn for you. Auntie still didn't quite believe it, but she seemed to have to believe it. The sisters around her began to tease her. She was a little angry. She stood up with a cold snort and called her child. Her child was hiding behind Jongwanan. When he heard the shout, he let go and ran over in a daze. "Let's go. What are you playing for? If you don't study hard, what's the point? You can't even find a wife." She dragged the child who didn't want to leave away, but the child who was said something inexplicably said "wow." He cried, and the cry filled the sky. The line broke up as soon as the child left. Jongwanan panted and turned around in confusion to look at the scattered children. It was obviously winter, but there was a thin layer of sweat on her head. "Why are everyone leaving?" Jongwanan muttered softly. She hadn't had enough fun yet. Loses who walked through the scattered people, took out a handkerchief and bent down to wipe the sweat from Zhangwanan's forehead. "They're all gone, and we're leaving too," he coaxed. "Why is that child crying?" Zhangwanan pulled Lu Zizhu's clothes and looked sideways. The child was rolling on the ground disobediently. Probably hungry," Lu Zizhu said nonsensically. Zhangwanan nodded. "Over there." Gu Jinchu got a bottle of water from nowhere and walked over casually. "Hey, what were so many aunties doing around you just now? It turns out that this guy has seen it all. What kind of friend is this? Don't you even know how to help him?" Lu Zizhu took Zhangwanan's hand and looked up to the sky, sighing helplessly, and said, "I almost got left here as my son-in-law." As soon as Lu Zizhu said these words, the three people looked at him with eyes wide open, looking like a gossip. Quick, tell the story." Gu Jinchu couldn't wait to know what had just happened. Lu Zizhu glanced down at Zhangwanan and saw that her eyes were also looking forward to it. Then he heard her say, "I also want to hear how that discerning aunt stole you from me." Lu Zizhu smiled and touched her head. It was rare that she wasn't jealous, so he would tell her a little bit. So as they walked, Lu Zizhu talked about the strange things they had just encountered. When he finished speaking, Gu Jinchu started teasing him, "You should agree and feel the love between brother and sister. Don't let people wait for you in vain. Don't forget us after you enter someone's house. The most important thing is that you don't forget that you once had a very good little green plum. After you leave, Anan, I will take care of you." Gu Jinchu kept teasing one sentence after another without fear of death. Every word he said was full of laughter, and the two little girls Xiaoran and Zhangwanan couldn't stop laughing. Lu Zizhu finally couldn't help but stretched out his legs and kicked Gu Jinchu hard when he wasn't paying attention. Gu Jinchu staggered a few times, stood upright, turned around and glared at him, and asked a little bit angrily, "Why are you kicking me? Did I agree and you only acted so much? I think you are not bad looking. Why don't I introduce you to that aunt's daughter? That aunt is very nice. She will treat you well when you go." Lu Zizhu also teased him. Gu Jinchu was so frightened that he shook his head like a rattle and said, No, you compliment me on my good looks and I admit it, but what you said next is a bit too much. I can't compete with you." Lu Zizhu couldn't hold back his temper, so he raised his leg and kicked him again. Gu Jinchu shouted and walked away from him and shouted, "Xiaoran is still here anyway, can't you save some face for me? Aren't you always very thick-skinned? When do you need more face?" Lu Zizhu raised his eyebrows. If he caught him again, he would kick him several times. Who asked him to push him to no end? Gu Jinchu was speechless, thinking that sometimes face is still very important. There are 8 updates today. 2 updates have already been updated at 24:12 and 24:14 respectively, so this is the 3rd update today. Please cast some votes, dear ones. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 496. Chapter 496, The people who eat melons are watching the show. Gu Jinchu was speechless, thinking that sometimes face is still very important. The 4 of them got on their bikes and headed home again. It was already afternoon, and although the sun had not set yet, the wind was very cold. "Just lie on my back when you're cold," Gu Jinchu, who was riding a bicycle, told Xiaoran again. This time Xiaoran shouted the word "good" loudly, and then lay down without any hesitation. She was too cowardly to miss that opportunity when she came in the morning, but she won't do it this time. The moment she lay down, she could clearly feel Gu Jinchu's body shaking slightly. She ignored him and just smiled. Gu Jinchu felt like his heart was in a mess while riding his bike. No girl had ever sat in his back seat and rested her head on her back. Xiaoran was the first one. He just said that because he didn't want Sioran to catch a cold and get sick, but he didn't expect that Sioran's back would become stiff the moment he lay down. He rode with a stiff back all the way, and when he returned to Lu's house, his back was already sore. He got out of the car and couldn't help but bend over and hammer hard. Sioran saw everything, and she walked to the side and secretly he pursed his lips and smiled. "Hey! Sister Ran Ran, do you have anything good to share with everyone? Why are you smiling so happily?" Jongwanan suddenly patted her on the back. Sioran was agitated, turned around, coughed twice, returned to her original appearance, and said hesitantly, "No. No." Jongwanan smiled and took her hand and led her toward the house. "You must be tired after playing all day. Let's go eat and drink." The four people collapsed on the sofa in an instant. Sioran was sitting more politely, while the other three were lying lazily. Even Luzes, who was lying down casually, and Gujinchu seemed to have come to his own home. They were all lying like that, which made Sioran a little embarrassed, and she looked out of place. Jongwanan noticed and said, "Lie down however you feel comfortable." "Sister Ran Ran, you're welcome. Just like me, I regard this place as my home," Gujinchu said shamelessly. Luzes, who happened to have just peeled an orange. He handed the meat to Jongwanan, and then threw the orange peel to Gujinchu. By coincidence, it landed on his head. The corners of Gujinchu's lips twitched. He raised his eyes and looked up, wondering what he would do if he was bullied so shamelessly. "Luzes, who, you'd better be polite to me, be careful and I'll complain to Uncle Lu and Aunt Lin," Gujinchu said angrily as he took off the orange peel from his head and threw it into the trash can. Luzes, who spread his hands and didn't care. He believed that Gujinchu had the heart but not the courage. Gujinchu got even angrier when he saw his nonchalant look, but he couldn't vent, so he had to take a long breath and pick up his mobile phone to play a small game. Games make him happy and let him vent. Sioran still sat down after the game and didn't even eat much of the fruit snacks placed on the table. Gujinchu couldn't stand it anymore, so he thought about it and moved over. Sioran was startled by Gujinchu, who suddenly moved over. She was sitting on a single sofa, and she wore thick clothes in winter. As soon as Gujinchu sat down, she was crowded. She turned her head to look in panic, but she didn't expect that Gujinchu was also turning his head and was about to say something to her. The distance between the two people instantly closed, almost face to face. The two melon eaters on one side opened their mouths slightly in excitement when they saw this scene, and the melon seeds in their hands scattered all over the ground. They were getting ready to watch a good show. However, after thinking about it, Luzes, who threw the oranges in his hand back into the fruit bowl and stretched out his long arm to cover Jongwanan's eyes. Fourth update. End of this chapter. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 497. Chapter 497. Use your ears to feel. However, after thinking about it, Luzes, who threw the oranges in his hand back into the fruit bowl and stretched out his long arm to cover Jongwanan's eyes. "What are you doing? You can't see even if you cover it." Jongwanan, whose eyes were covered, lost her sight instantly. Her voice was low and anxious. "Hush, children can't see, use your ears to feel," Luzes, who whispered. "If she can see with her ears, what's the use of her eyes?" Jongwanan struggled a few times and Luzes, who didn't let go. Finally, she had to give up because she suddenly found that she could see a little bit of something through the cracks in Luzes, whose hand. Satisfied. The two people sitting very close to each other on the single sofa seemed to be still and did not move for a long time. Gujinchu was usually very flexible in some things, but at this moment his mind went blank and his throat lost his voice. He felt that his throat was smoking and it hurt. He saw himself in Sioran's eyes. Sioran also saw herself in his eyes, and her heart was pounding. It was eerily quiet in the huge house, and the sound of breathing and heartbeat could all be heard clearly. The two people over there were still stunned without any reaction. There was a sudden and unexpected sound of the door closing, and the four people who were originally quiet were instantly startled. Gu Jinchu even jumped away in an exaggerated manner, jumping to the place where he was just sitting. Xiaoran also blushed and turned around blankly, staring at the wet melon seeds in her hands. Her palms were sweaty and the shells of the melon seeds were soaked. Zhang Wanan was finally able to see the light again. She and Luzes who looked towards the door at the same time, and saw Lin 11 walking in from the outside. Sigh, Lin 11 may have ruined a good thing. Hey, everyone is here. It's fun. I bought some vegetables and asked Aunt Lu to cook them for us to eat at night, Lin 11 said to the four of them with a smile. She came back too early today, and she came back at the wrong time. Zhang Wanan and Luzes who looked at each other and sighed helplessly. Look at the two people who have separated over there. Their faces are flushed. They are probably very embarrassed now. Ahem, eat oranges, snacks, and drink soda. Zhang Wanan stepped forward and let no one get a piece in front of him, trying to liven up the atmosphere. But it's of no use at all. This time the embarrassment is bad. All Gu Jinchu was thinking about was whether to slap himself, and he didn't know why he suddenly jumped over and got so close. How embarrassing it was. He glanced at Xiaoran secretly. She was still in a daze. Xiaoran's mind is blank now, and her heart has not yet calmed down. The awkward atmosphere between the two of them lasted until they finished eating. Lu Lin and Lin 11 even misunderstood that they had quarreled. But think about it, although Gu Jinchu is naughty, he is very gentleman towards girls, and Xiaoran is not the kind of girl who can quarrel with others. What's wrong tonight? Why aren't you talking? Lin 11 looked at the four children with a smile. Zhang Wanan didn't know what to say, but Luzes who reacted quickly, pursed his lips tightly, took out his mobile phone, typed a few words and showed it to Lin 11. Lin 11 looked at it and suddenly realized, who do you think talks less during the competition? The four of them glanced at Luzes who and understood immediately, and nodded immediately. Okay, come on, Lin 11 said cheerfully. She had not thought that her son would also play this kind of game. After dinner, Luzes Hu and Gu Jinchu went to the game room, while Zhang Wanan and Xiaoran returned to the room. Everyone should be quiet for a while. Maybe after you come out, you will forget about the embarrassing thing just now. As soon as she returned to the room, Xiaoran closed the door and took a deep breath. Zhang Wanan was the only one here. She finally dared to breathe a sigh of relief. The fifth update. End of this chapter. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 498. Chapter 498, Can you help me chase him? As soon as she returned to the room, Xiaoran closed the door and took a deep breath. Zhang Wanan was the only one here. She finally dared to breathe a sigh of relief. Zhang Wanan took her hand, pulled her to the bedside, sat down and asked, Sister Ran Ran, are you okay? Xiaoran shook her head, but how could she be fine? Her heartbeat had been beating all night, especially when she met Gu Jinchu's eyes. Anyone in a situation like that just now would be nervous. After all, it's such a close distance. But fortunately Lin 11 is back, otherwise she wouldn't know what to do. Zhang Wanan didn't believe it, but she didn't know how to ask further, so she took a bottle of milk from the small table on the side and handed it to Xiaoran. Luzes who bought it for her, and she would not give it to ordinary people. Drink some milk and calm down for a while, Zhang Wanan said. Xiaoran took it, inserted the straw and took a few sips, and then breathed a sigh of relief. Now her mind was filled with the scene just now. When she thought about it, her face felt like it was on fire and her ears were very hot. Anan, I. Xiaoran suddenly paused and shook her head helplessly. What's wrong? We are all good friends. Just say what you want to say. Zhang Wanan looked at her and said seriously. Forget it, it's okay. Xiaoran looked confused. Zhang Wanan tisked and said seriously, you can't hold it in, just say it if you have something to say. Xiaoran pursed her lips tightly and said nothing. Zhang Wanan also looked at her and said nothing. After a while, Xiaoran finally spoke after a mental struggle, but her voice was so low that it was almost inaudible. "Does he have a girlfriend?" Xiaoran asked. "Ah? What did you say?" Zhang Wanan didn't hear clearly and moved closer to her. It was very difficult to say it originally. Zhang Wanan didn't hear it clearly, but she couldn't say it a second time and didn't know how to speak again. "Sister Ran Ran," Zhang Wanan called out helplessly. "You should be more confident. Don't always be like this. You have friends like us behind you," Zhang Wanan said. She felt that Xiaoran was too timid and sometimes she didn't even dare to say anything. Xiaoran was suddenly moved when she heard Zhang Wanan's words. She thought, yes, she has friends now. These friends shouldn't betray her, right? She really should be more confident, so she plucked up the courage and repeated it again, louder, and asked, "Does he have a girlfriend? Does Gu Jinchu have a girlfriend?" Zhang Wanan immediately became happy when she heard that she was asking this question. It seemed that she and Luzes who were right and they liked it. Otherwise, why would you want to meet people all the time? Xiaoran made it very obvious, they all saw it, but only the person she had a crush on didn't. However, Gu Jinchu had big intentions, and it was expected that he was so careless that he couldn't tell. Zhang Wanan shook his head hurriedly and explained, No, brother Jinchu hasn't talked about it until now." Xiaoran raised the corner of her mouth, put down the breast in her hand, grabbed Zhang Wanan's little hand and said nervously, "Anan, can you help me?" "Huh?" Zhang Wanan was confused. Help me, pursue Gu Jinchu, I like him." Xiaoran finally said it, but she said it to Zhang Wanan. She needed help, and she also needed more courage to confess to Gu Jinchu. Zhang Wanan didn't expect Xiaoran to say it, nor did she expect that she would ask her for help, but since she had said it, she regarded her as a friend. Zhang Wanan nodded immediately and said generously, "You, busy sister, help me." Xiaoran nodded excitedly. It was probably better to have Zhang Wanan's help than to have a secret love alone. "Sister Ran Ran, tell me the truth, did you fall in love with Gu Jinchu the moment you saw the photo?" Zhang Wanan smiled mischievously, looking like a gossip. 6th update. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 499. Chapter 499. I have something to tell you. Sister Ran Ran, tell me the truth, did you fall in love with Gu Jinchu the moment you saw the photo? Zhang Wanan smiled mischievously, looking like a gossip. Xiaoran nodded and admitted that indeed, he fell in love with the photo the moment he saw it. It was just a matter of one glance. At that time, all she could think about was how this boy could smile so brightly. He must be a lively boy. Unlike herself, he seemed to be living in darkness and didn't even have a friend. But fortunately, she also had friends later on, and they were them. Zhang Wanan smiled at her. She patted Xiaoran on the shoulder and said teasingly, "Tell me, why do you always blush when facing Gu Jinchu? That's what you look like." Xiaoran smiled, grabbed her hand and said, "But can you keep it a secret for me first?" "Who should I keep secret from? Gu Jinchu's words are okay, but loses who can't. He also saw it." "Sister Ran Ran, you still don't know how to hide it," Zhang Wanan said and shook his head helplessly. Xiaoran was speechless. She thought she had done a good job keeping the secret. "Just keep it a secret from Gu Jinchu," Xiaoran said. Zhang Wanan nodded and made an okay gesture. "By the way, he won't know if it's kept secret. After all, he's so heartless that he can't tell." "When will you let him know?" Zhang Wanan asked. Xiaoran thought about it in silence for a while and said, We have agreed that we will go to the same school as him in college. He will protect me. When the time comes, he will tell me when there is a suitable opportunity. Sioran couldn't help but laugh when she thought of what they said by the lake. Jongwanan suddenly grasped the key point and asked excitedly, by the lake? Protect you? What on earth did you say? Sioran smiled, actually, it's nothing. He just said some things about me, and then he said he would protect me. He has a good heart. If others had the same experience as me, he would say the same thing. Jongwanan curled her lips and said, that's not certain, maybe Brother Jinchu. Before Jongwanan could finish speaking, there was a knock on the door. The two of them looked at the door warily at the same time, and then a voice came from outside, Anan, it's me, is Sioran here? It's Gu Jinchu's voice. Jongwanan looked at Sioran on the side and replied, yes. Let her come out for a moment. I have something to say to her, Gu Jinchu said through the door panel. Then shout it yourself. Jongwanan smiled slyly and pretended not to hear the people outside. The people outside the door were silent for a moment, and just when they thought Gu Jinchu had left, the voice sounded again, Sioran, are you there? Yes, yes. Sioran immediately responded in a panic when her name was called. Can you come out for a moment? Gu Jinchu asked. Okay, wait a minute, Sioran said and looked at Jongwanan. Jongwanan winked at her and whispered, I'm calling you, go quickly. Sioran tangled her fingers nervously, stood up after a few seconds and walked towards the door. When she walked to the door, she took a deep breath and opened it. Gu Jinchu was standing against the wall waiting for her. When he saw her coming out, he stood up straight. I'm out, I have something to tell you, Gu Jinchu said. Sioran nodded. Let's go, it's not convenient to talk here, go to my room. Sioran nodded and followed him silently. When Gu Jin first saw her like this, he suddenly wanted to laugh. He always felt that this girl was naive and cute. After entering the room, Gu Jinchu pointed to the chair by the window and said, sit. So Sioran walked over and sat down obediently. The two sat facing each other. First one lowered his head, and the other looked out the window. They were silent for a while before Gu Jinchu opened his mouth to break the silence. After all, he was the one who asked people to come. He couldn't say nothing when everyone came. 7th update. End of this chapter. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yun. Chapter 500. Chapter 500. We are still good friends, right? This is outrageous. Well, I was just in the living room. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. I just saw you sitting stiffly and wanted to pass on some experience. But who knew that the sofa was a bit small, or maybe I was too fat? You believe I really didn't mean it, and I haven't realized what to do. Gu Jinchu thought about it for a while before speaking out. Just now he and Luzes who went to the game room not to play games at all, but to think about how to explain. If he couldn't explain it well, he would feel uncomfortable, and the game couldn't save him. Sioran knew that he was talking to her about this, so she was mentally prepared for it. At that time, they were all embarrassed and at a loss. She understood that feeling, and she was also involved. It's okay, I know you mean well, Sioran said with a smile. So we are still good friends, right? Gu Jinchu asked cautiously. Sioran's heart trembled when she heard his question. She tugged her lips stiffly and said, we are good friends. This matter will not cause us to break up after we have only been friends for a day. Gu Jinchu scratched his head and smiled sheepishly after hearing her words. He thought for a while, touched his pocket, took out a small candy, stood up and put it into Sioran's hand, saying, I'll give you one candy to eat. It's very delicious. That's all. Thank you. Sioran looked down at the candy in her hand and felt uncomfortable in her heart. You eat it. Gu Jinchu was a little anxious when she saw that she was not eating it while holding it in her hand. Sioran nodded, pursed her lips and peeled off the package, then put the candy into her mouth. It was sour and sweet, with a little bit of bitterness, but the bitterness didn't seem to taste like that candy. Is it delicious? Gu Jinchu looked at her expectantly. Sioran nodded, it's delicious. That's good. Gu Jinchu breathed a sigh of relief. After Sioran ate a candy, she was afraid that she would be embarrassed if she stayed any longer, so she got up and said that she was going to find Zhang, and then left. Gu Jinchu looked at her back and let out a long sigh of relief. He hoped that she would not be too embarrassed by what happened today, and that she would still be good friends. I hope everyone can forget about this after a good sleep. Sioran returned to Zhang room. At this moment, Zhang was lying on the bed facing the door, looking at the door, as if waiting for her. You're back, how are you? What did you say? Zhang was indeed waiting for her. When he saw her coming in, he couldn't help but ask excitedly. Sioran walked over and sat down and said, I'm just sorry for that matter. Then what, it's gone, Zhang continued to ask. Well, gave me a candy. Sioran told the truth. Zhang was speechless. It seemed that the two of them really needed help to achieve success. That night, Sioran still didn't sleep well that night, and Gu Jinchu also didn't sleep well. Their minds were filled with the scene at night, which was lingering and unbearable. Gu Jinchu got up several times throughout the night and washed his face with cold water in an attempt to drown out the scene, but to no avail. However, he seemed to be tired from all the hard work and finally fell asleep. Sioran was the same. After tossing and turning for a long time, she fell asleep. It's just that the scene still appeared in their dreams. It seems that it will be difficult to forget it in the near future. The next day, the four of them sat at home watching a movie. In the afternoon, Xiaodong sent someone to pick up Sioran, while Gu Jinchu had a dinner before leaving. Before leaving, Zhang asked Sioran when she would come again. Sioran glanced at Gu Jinchu and said, I'll be here when the vacation comes. If you miss me, call me. Zhang nodded vigorously and said goodbye to her. Asterisk. Sioran started to take the final exam soon after he returned. After 2 busy days and the exam was over, Zhang said that she could finally relax. The 8th update. Today's update is over, please vote again. End of this chapter.